Hey y'all, you got Doug Gore, Dougie Doo here with Cajun Soft Wash. Today I want to talk a little bit about um, priming our pumps and what we always hear from Tim Hazelton and Paul Cassander of, you have an air leak, you have an air leak, you have an air leak. I get kind of tired of hearing you have an air leak, right? So you call them up and they say, yeah, you got an air leak. And so you go and you replace the hoses, you replace the fittings, you replace the tubing, you replace everything, and you still have a problem. And you call them up and they say, you got an air leak. Okay. So here's the thing. You probably have an air leak. Sorry for the buildup, but you probably have an air leak. I had one of my guys help put together a new pump that we installed, doing some rebuilds. And after he ran all new tubing and all that, we had air leaks. And so I went back and I looked at everything and looked at how he installed it. And I explained to him what he did wrong. And so it made me think about doing this video to make sure everybody kind of has a good overall view of how it really should be connected. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. So real quick, the first thing I want to start with is your clamp. Your clamp is obviously supposed to be nice and round. Your tubing is obviously supposed to be nice and round so that they fit together. If you use an oversized clamp, what happens is you end up tightening, 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 and tightening to get to where it starts to clamp on the tubing. When you do that, you get this long tail that happens. Look, when you start getting that long tail, what's happening is look at the inside of the clamp, right? This clamp, which obviously small, but I'm trying to show for an example here. It's flat on this side right here. It's nice and round at the bottom, and then it's oblong near the top. So when it tries to clamp onto something, it's not being round and it's not getting a good seal, which can cause an air leak. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, when you go and you go to clamp down to your barb, you want to make sure that you're kind of centered on this, not all the way up against the bolt head and not over the end. All these little ridges on there are to help that seal, if you would. If you get too far over, number one, you're not getting on there, so you're not getting the good seal. This is how they're supposed to be installed, like right about like that, okay? The next thing, when you make your connection, right, as you put your tubing in, don't put it all the way against the bolt head. I'm going to kind of explain after I show something else. One of the things that I like to do is I like to heat up my fittings, right? Or I like to heat up my tubing. By heating up the tubing, I make it more pliable and I feel like I get a better seal on it. And I'm telling you, I very rarely have a problem with air leaks. The problem is when you overheat it. And I know that there are some guys who like to get it ooey gooey and put it on there, they clamp it, they squeeze it, and they never have a problem, and that's great. I'm happy for them. For me, I like to get it warm to where it's pliable and makes a good connection. But the biggest part of that is, you see how the end of this, I don't know if it's going to come through on the video, is flared out. Okay, that's what my guy did too. If you get these really hot and then you push this on there, you have a tendency to go right up against the nut that's right there. What it does is it takes that tubing and it flares it out, which by flaring it out gives a better opportunity for an air leak. Okay, it's the same thing if you don't push it all the way in there. I mean, to where you flare it, but you push it right up against here, right? If you push it right up against the nut part, if you do that, what happens is as you tighten down on the tubing, that tubing is being squished outward. If it's right up against that nut, it starts to flare or starts to buckle it, if you would, which can cause an air leak. Okay. The next thing I want to look at is where you make your connection to your PVC tubing, okay, if you're using PVC. If you're using brass, it's not as important, but I would really recommend not using Teflon tape. I would instead recommend using like the Teflon paste, and the blue stuff seems to work the best for us. Part of the reason being is if you start to tighten down on this, if you use Teflon tape, especially if you put too much on there, what happens is you're building the size of your fitting here, right? And then it's too big for this, and that's what causes these to crack. and then you over tighten them and they crack. Okay. Part of it is here, use your paste on here, put it in there, tighten it up, get it to where you feel like, okay, it's nice and tight, hand tight, tighten it up, good as you can by hand. Then put your wrench on there, turn it a quarter, maybe half of a turn. That should be good. Okay, you shouldn't have to go any further than that, and then you should be fine from there. The other thing is to make sure when you put your paste on here, don't get it up over the end. What happens is if you get too much on there and you get it inside, as it dries up, it becomes kind of a solid. If that solid gets through, gets sucked into your valve, it's going to create a problem that you don't want. So get it on there with some paste, get it nice and tight, quarter to a half a turn, put your tubing on, not all the way, enough that there's a gap there. Go ahead and put your clamp on, get it right kind of about there, clamp it down, you should be good to go. Do not over tighten. If you over tighten the clamp, then what happens is it breaks and it's a bear to get off. You can always tighten it down a little bit more if you need to a little bit later. Do heat it up a little bit. The next thing that I'm going to suggest is if you're still having a problem, take you some, I want to call this Teflon tape, but it's not Teflon tape. I'm going to use a different color here because I have it. This is electrical tape. Okay, the black stuff is better, it's whiter, all that kind of stuff, but I don't have any right here in front of me. So my clamp is right about here. Take this electrical tape. This is not a fix. I'm not trying to say use electrical tape as your fix. I'm trying to help you if you feel like there might be a problem there, or to help you decide to eliminate the problem. Take your electrical tape, keep it nice and tight, go right up against the clamp that you have on there, right? Because the clamp is over the top of the tubing. Now go right up against it, again, pulling it tight, basically going in between where the tubing and the fitting are, and keep on going from there. Now you're going between the fitting and the PVC pipe, making sure that you close that gap, if you would, get it nice and tight, keep it nice and tight, which I'm not doing. Then go over the top of the PVC fitting, keeping it nice and tight. The reason I'm suggesting that is simply that if there's a crack here or maybe on the bottom, it's going to help seal that crack and help tell you that that's where your issue is. Same thing with doing it here at the ends. You'll know, okay, yeah, now everything is flowing good. Really, that's where you can isolate the problem there, if you would. So those are kind of some things that I wanted to bring up, especially not flaring out the ends, making sure you use the right size clamps, that sort of thing. And hey, again, I appreciate y'all for listening to me, and Dougie Doo out.